Have you here. Great to see some familiar names. Hi, Tara. Hi, Marta. Marta, it's been forever. Hey, Donna. Hi, Caroline. I don't think I know you. So welcome. Hello, hello. Are you still at Chubb? I'm asking that to Marta. Yes. You must be getting your gold watch soon over there. My goodness. It's great. Welcome, everybody.
Oh, nice to see you too, Donna. I wonder where is everyone popping in from this morning? I myself, I'm in St. Catharines. Glenn's in Toronto.
Lovely St. Catharines.
Yes, it's actually nice and warm here today. We got a little bit of snow and it's melting, which is okay with me. I'm I'm a sunshine and tropics person.
I hear you on that. We went to Victoria last week to see my mom, and Victoria, I like going there in January, February because it's usually not like winter out there. And they had the worst snowstorm they had had in forever. They've been in a deep freeze and they don't know how to handle it out there. So we actually saw a snowplow sliding across the road. It was quite funny.
Oh my gosh, it's like those videos you see on YouTube or social media.
Yeah.
Plows and cars
Exactly.
rolling down.
Awesome. All right, Shelby. Well, should we get started?
I
I know,
think
I
let's
know
get
other people will be
started.
streaming in, but let's go.
Yeah, let's go. All right. So welcome everyone to our webinar, the top 5 challenges facing key talent right now and what to do about it. This is our first webinar of the year of 2024. So we're so excited to have you here to join us and kick off the new year with some new facts and information. If any scheduling conflicts have come up for you just now in the next couple of moments, not to worry. We are recording this and we're going to send out a recording of this webinar. And as well, you can always find recordings of past webinars or sessions on our website on the airwaves section. So you can go and explore there. And there's lots of other fun videos, resources, and past webinars there as well. My name is Shelby Brown, and I'm the Director of Client Services here at the Roundtable. I'll be your host today. I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. I respectfully acknowledge that in Toronto, we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Toronto is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. All right, and I want to share something on my next slide here that's very important to us. In January of 2022, the Roundtable embarked on a multi-year partnership with Inspire, which is a national Indigenous registered charity, to fund 215 bursaries in support of Indigenous youth pursuing higher education by donating 10% of all referral sales. So we'll have a little bit more on this later and how you can help us meet that goal. So before we start, just a few quick housekeeping items. As I said, we're recording today's webinar. You'll receive a link with the recording. As well, we'll release a little summary blog post a few days following. We really want to hear from you. We'll have the chat open this whole session. I'll be monitoring that, so don't be shy to add your thoughts or comments in there. We love an interactive crowd. As well, the Q&A will be open, so feel free to pop your questions in there at any time. No need to wait till the end of the session. We'll be answering those as we go. For those who are new to us, we're the Roundtable, and we just celebrated our Sweet 16 years in business. And we're a company that helps leaders navigate change, disruption, and growth by building mindsets and behaviors that matter most. Now, I'd like to introduce you to Glenn Roberts McCabe, Glenn like Shine. Glenn is the founder and president of the Roundtable, which, as I said, just celebrated its 16th anniversary in December of 2023. Glenn is a certified executive coach and has over 30 years experience leading teams in both private, public, and non-for-profit sectors. Glenn is the creator of several multi-award-winning group coaching programs, including the Roundtable for Leaders program, the Roundtable Catalyst, and the Roundtable High Performance Team Coach. And finally, is the author of 2 best-selling books, The Grassroots Leadership Revolution, and Did I Really Sign Up for This? So Glenn, I will pass it over to you.
Thanks, Shelby. And it's great to be here today. And I'm excited to talk to all of you about this because I know in the group, just those of you that are signed up and that I know, you have a lot of opinions about the stuff in your own observations. So at the end of last year, our team got together and we were talking about what we were seeing bubbling up with our clients. And I think it was Colleen on our team actually joked and said, we should do something that's called your high potential leaders aren't telling you. And so there's a bit of that's in the root of this is some of the things that are kind of underneath the surface. And so I'm excited to see what resonates with you, what you see maybe a little differently, and what additional things. We actually had 10 trends. We kind of narrowed it down to 5 for our trends report because everybody told us that people want short and sweet these days and don't have time for a lot of content. So interested to see what else you're seeing out there. So as Shelby mentioned, as we go along, please do put things in the chat, comments, questions. Shelby's going to be monitoring it and we'll kind of get my attention as needed. I'll pause at different breakpoints to kind of bring you in, but yeah, let's see how it goes. So I think just to set some context, Shelby shared a little bit about the roundtable, what we do, but I kind of like to kind of give everybody a bit of a visual, for us, when we usually get called initially, the conversation starts with our leaders need leadership training, or we need this person to have a coach. And I think, there's a lot of seasoned people on the team, and we know this to be a fairly shallow conversation because when you get under the covers, what we're usually trying to do in organizations is one of 3 big things. And it's either we're trying to build exceptional leadership, we're trying to build exceptional teams and team performance, or we're trying to build exceptional culture. We're usually trying to do all 3, right? They're all so interconnected. But at the roundtable over the last 16 years, we've really sort of come to a point of view that's around just building those things and certainly building leadership in this individualistic way that we sort of approach leadership development isn't sustainable. And for organizations to really get into flow, like where I think, and especially those of us that are in talent, to actually have an easier time of it, we need to shift the responsibility from the individual to the collective. And so that's what we've really doubled down on at the roundtable is going deeper and helping clients unleash the collective impact within their organizations. And so we've just developed a number of systems and group coaching and team coaching processes that do that. And, our primary focus is, and we have a bit of a belief system around this, that if you've got 100% of your talent, where we're looking is in the top 20% of your leadership talent, because we feel that if we can raise the bar on those individuals, give them more tools to succeed, then they can bring the ripples into your organization. We have an approach that's really grounded in positive psychology and strengths-based approach. So if we can help those leaders get better, then they will help the rest of the organization get better. And, Shelby touched on, I think, a few of our practice areas through the programs that we run, but we've got these group coaching systems. So we've got 3 programs that are group coaching systems. We've got team coaching, and we have individual coaching for behavior change. So a lot of the observations that we have come from the work that we do in all 3 of those areas. And I'm going to do this because people ask me all the time, Brian, what's the difference between group and team coaching? Group coaching is cross-functional leaders coming together in a group in our case, for a very kind of structured learning experience against certain goals. Team coaching is working with an intact team. So we'll work with executive teams or like a marketing function to help them work specifically on team issues, but mostly around the dynamics of the team. Why are they setting goals and not achieving them? What's going on within the culture of that team and the norms within that team that are slowing them down? So 3 things that we focus on. So today's conversation, we are going to be using sort of data from all of those kinds of places and external data to validate, it's not just the opinion of people at the roundtable, but we're going to take a look at, what is the current state of the nation out there? And I'm sure you'll have lots of opinions on that. What are the struggles that leaders in these, whether you want to call it a high potential pool or high performing pool, or your next talent or succession candidates, those top 20%, what are the struggles that they're facing that they may not be articulating. And then some action ideas. So we'll go through each struggle. We've got 5 trends in the trend report. We're going to focus in on 3 today that give you some action ideas along the way. So I'm curious, just in the chat, like, what are some of the things that are generally happening in your world of work right now? Would you say it's smooth sailing? Would you say it's crisis after crisis? Would you say it's, we're struggling with how to deal with hybrid versus return to work mandates? What's happening? I'd love to see some kind of comments in the chat on things that you all are seeing in your worlds. So I'll give you a second to type in some things. Anybody got anything for me? Workload is high, feels very reactive all the time. Oh, Amy, we are hearing that across the board. I think every team session I've been in, one of the conversations is around boundaries and saying no. So that one's really common. Too much to do and a real want to lead their teams well. Yeah, and we're going to talk, Tara, about how there's this expectation that employees have for more time with their managers. I think the next generation of employees in particular are really, we know this has been talked about for several years now. It's not new news, but coaching and mentoring, when you look at any of the sort of engagement surveys and when Bain, McKinsey, any of those groups come out with their human capital trends, one of the top ones is always coaching, mentoring, feedback that's being looked for. So we've got employees that are looking for more time with managers than ever before. So here's the thing that I think we'd all agree on, right, is that we're just in an environment of change where we're being bombarded everywhere. And that there's so much uncertainty, there's talent shortages, we've got Chat GPT, AI, is that going to take my job? How are we, and I think the labor unrest is a really big one. We've got a number of clients right now that are dealing with a lot of those kinds of issues. So there's a lot going on and there's a lot for managers to deal with. Yeah, and I love that, Tara, about people exiting or navigating a toxic manager environment. We're going to talk about the impact of that too today, actually. So great point. So we've got all of this happening, and at the same time, we're saying to leaders, hey, you got to drive results. You got to drive performance. I've never seen an organization that has said, hey, we had pretty good results last year. Let's do a little less this year. Let's back it down a bit. I mean, we've got clients that had one of their best years ever during COVID because of COVID. And the following year had an increase on those results as opposed to going back to pre-COVID levels. They were trying to build off of post-COVID levels, which, it just kind of speaks to, this relentless push for more that leaders are under, the pressure they're under around that. And at the same time, keep your teams happy and engaged, right? Make sure you don't lose anybody. Make sure we've got good good org health scores, good retention scores. We're hitting those best companies to work for lists so that we can recruit and bring in more people. So it's a real tough balancing act. And a lot of leaders that we talk to are really kind of clinging by their fingertips, and I think coaching, when you're one with people who are under all this pressure, I often will use the analogy with a lot of clients. I'll say, I feel like you're like Atlas carrying the world on your shoulders here. And some of that has to do with who these people are. And I think that's what's really critical to kind of understand about your key talent. So here, let me give you the 5 trends up front, and then we'll start diving into each one. But here are the 5 that we sort of focused on. One is, and it's kind of an interesting one, and it's this idea that, and I love this little guy going, excuse me. So it's this, I'm afraid to demand too much of my team. I'm worried about pushing them too hard, right? So we're hearing that from leaders. We're also hearing the one that Amy, you threw in the chat, I'm overwhelmed. Like there's just too many priorities. I don't know how I'm going to kind of cope. I'm sort of drowning, but I can't let anybody know that I'm drowning. This other one, where's the love, we called it. really is this, it's a bit of an epidemic, I'm not going to lie, around more senior leaders. Senior leadership, when you start getting into the vice president, SVP, EVP, even CEO level, some real gaps here. Teams being in constant flux, constant turnover, and leaders struggling to get to performance because they're just having people move in and out. And then finally, a lack of clarity on priorities, this real sort of, it's like a tug of war. This is important. No, this is important. No, we're changing direction. And I think we're not going to talk about this trend, but I do feel like a lot of this starts at the top of the house. We're seeing a lot of senior executive teams, because of the change that's going on in the world, they actually don't know the direction. And I think from a historic way that we've organized our organizations in this very hierarchical model, I think one of the challenges, frankly, for executive teams is there is this belief system that, hey, we're the executive team, we need to know how to do this, and we're going to hunker down and figure it out. But when you're working in real time, which is what a lot of organizations are struggling with and dealing with right now, that sort of insular way of approaching figuring out what the priorities are can create a lot of chaos when you then realize that you have to pivot or change. And as you know, for all of you know, as it trickles down in the organization, it gets harder and harder and harder, right? And if you're a manager leading frontline units or you know, divisions that are a few layers underneath and the direction's constantly in flux, we're seeing a lot of that. And what are my priorities is another pinning of this, why people are overwhelmed. So let's look at the first trend in a little more detail. I'm afraid to demand too much. This one, I mean, there's many stories I can tell you, but the one that really sticks with me about this was sitting in it was actually one of our high performance team coach programs, which is focused on helping team leaders become better team coaches. And this organization, if you think of the extremes of return to work mandates versus let's stay as flexible as we are with COVID, had leaned more in the other direction. They're sort of being more hybrid, work when you need to work. But one of the challenges that they had started having was that people were actually refusing to come into the office for team meetings. They were refusing to, you know, participate in certain on-site activities. And, you know, there's times and places that really it is beneficial to bring everybody together. And so a few of these leaders were saying, like, I just don't know how to get them back in, and I don't know what to do. And I thought, my reaction was, wow, this is really interesting. This is, the pandemic. And what happened in the pandemic was leadership behavior shifted. And our global partner management research group actually did some research about this. And they took a look at what were the leadership behaviors pre-pandemic, so 2018 to 2019, and then what were the leadership behaviors in the waning pandemic, so 2022 to 23. So it was a survey of about 11,500 leaders across 50 industries, 40 countries. And it's quite interesting what they found changed. And so with observers, so they use it using a 360, so it's a behavioral 360. So it's really anchored in how are leaders' behaviors shifting. So in this waning pandemic, what they found that was different than the pre-pandemic behaviors of leaders was, first, deference to authority, second, cooperation, and third, dominance. So those are the three behaviors. So deference to authority is really around looking up, looking to senior leadership for direction. They're basically following the rules. I mean, I chose an image of a sergeant because the Army is probably the highest sort of example of a deference to authority culture. Deference to authority went up. Cooperation, which is about being willing to trade off my agenda to help support you with yours, being a helpful associate, that went up. And dominance, which is the level of assertiveness and forcefulness that we bring to leadership, went down. So it's showing a picture of a kind of a softer approach to leadership. This is from the perspective of observers. So these would have been direct reports, peers, boss, that we're seeing this shift in leaders' behavior. Leaders themselves felt a shift in empathy. They saw their empathy going up post-pandemic than it had been before. So, nutshell, post-pandemic leaders are less forceful and competitive, more willing to help and accommodate others. They're seeking the opinion more of senior leaders and following organization rules. And individually, they feel like they're more empathetic. And my curious question when I saw MRG release this research and seeing where a lot of our clients are, I'm thinking, yeah, but is this going to last? And I'm curious to hear from you. Do you think this, I'm going to call it the kinder, gentler, more supportive, empathetic leadership is holding up right now? Would you give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Or is it neutral? Like, do you feel like not much changed with your leaders before the pandemic and they're pretty much the same now? Are you seeing that this empathetic, soft, slightly softer, not hugely softer, but slightly softer approach is continuing or not? So throw in the chat, would you give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down? I think we have chat emojis in the chat too, don't we? What do you think? I'd say that I see a desire to sit on people first, but there's a feeling pressured by the shift above, which is more direct. Yeah, I would say that that's what's starting to happen. Like, I think there's a real push-pull. Like, I actually heard a secondhand conversation that one very senior executive had made a comment like, we need to get people back off, we need to get people off their Pelotons and back to the office. And this was after that organization had delivered sky-high results. And I think there's a view around productivity and where people need to be productive that is very ingrained. And there's a neuroscience reason behind it. And some of you might have seen me talk about this before, but our brains, from a neuroscience perspective, there's sort of two sides that are operating. There is the non-social side and there's a social side, or simply put, there's a results side and there's a relationship side. And on the non-social side, that's where brains are doing the complex thinking. It's learning agility and speed. That's where we store our broad knowledge. This is the prefrontal cortex stuff. This is our rational brain. Then we've got the social side, right? Where more of this sort of collaboration, authenticity, trust, the relationships, the ability to read people, EQ sits on the social side. And again, Management Research Group a few years ago was commissioned by a gentleman named Matthew Lieberman to look to see, can leaders balance both? Like, we say we want them to do both, but can most leaders balance both? And the answer was a decided no. And the reason is that we have a what Lieberman called a neural seesaw. So for most of us, if we're focused on a social aspect, the result side goes quieter in our brain. That side of our brain goes quieter, and vice versa. And very few leaders balance both sides effectively. And MRG found it was actually less than 6% of top performing leaders actually balance both. Most leaders, most of us on this call, are going to have a bias towards leading one way or another. And so you can dig more into that in Matthew's book, Social, if you're interested. But this is what's kind of causing some of the challenges here, and why we're seeing organizations take very different stands depending on who's the CEO. Right? So if you've got a CEO who's very results driven, I think that's where we're going to be. That's where we're seeing, like, mandated back in office. You look at Elon Musk as an example of this, right? I don't know if the man has an empathy chip existing. So he's a great example of somebody who's very much that non-social, rational side, the way he thinks about the world and business, versus other leaders that are taking a more flexible approach and maybe being being more balanced, right? And so, yeah, Tara, I was the same as you. I had to really shift my empathy early on in my leadership career because I was so results focused. And I still joke at the roundtable, one of our core values is to have fun, and I've delegated have fun because I just keep forgetting about it because I focus on making an impact and getting shit done all the time, which are two of our other values. So it's something that we constantly have to bring awareness to and get intentional about as leaders. So one of the things that I think we need to start talking about, like the word accountability became very buzzy this last year. Like I just hear more and more senior teams, well, we need people to be accountable. We need to build accountability. And I don't know, and then they're using return to office as a way to build accountability. But I think that it's not just accountability, right? Like it's really about this idea. We're kind of straddling a couple of things here. And I adapted this from Rasmus Hogarth's model that's slightly different, but it kind of inspired me because I was thinking about, we've got leaders that you can be compassionate or you can be completely uncaring. You can hold people accountable or you can be completely uncommitted to the result. And what we're seeing when it comes to like, I'm struggling to hold my people accountable is we've got people with empathetic avoidance. They are overusing their empathy. They have swung their pendulum. And in the pandemic, we needed to, and that's why you see leaders going, hey, I'm more empathetic than I used to be, because we were all in crisis together, right? And everybody was scared and everybody was dialing up like check-in calls and how are we doing and social connection and all of those kinds of things. And if that's your comfort zone as a leader, like if all these years you've been, wrestling in this results and empathy organization, and now all of a sudden it's kind of going back to more results, but you really liked how you were leading in this empathy, this support piece, having to mandate people to do things again and hold them accountable is going to feel a little difficult, right? Because the other place was a bit probably more of your comfort zone. So empathetic avoidance is when we're too compassionate, we're not committed to the outcome. Human-centered leadership is where we have the balance of both. I'm going to go on record and say I really detest this term human-centered leadership, but I wanted to put it here because I think it's very misunderstood. Human-centered leadership is that ability to do hard things in a kind way. Leadership is hard. You have to make tough decisions as a leader, right? You have to, sometimes lay people off that you've worked with for years. You've got to push an agenda. You've got to hold people accountable to results. But human-centered leadership, what it means is doing all of that in a way that shows compassion to others, in a way that puts people at the center of your message. I think when people use the term human-centered leadership in organizations, because it is very, in vogue right now, the problem is people below will hear that phrase and think, oh, I'm the center. It should all be about me as the person. And I think if you've got leaders who are more inclined towards empathetic avoidance, they're going to have a tough time holding that accountability piece in place with people, right? So if you're using that language, I'd say to you, really make sure you're educating people on what it means. I was in an organization yesterday that are trying to get decision-making more embedded in the organization. And when I was listening to the team struggling with the decision-making, you realize it's because they've interpreted decision-making in their way, and it's not aligned with what the organization meant by it. So, but this is what we need to be moving leaders towards, is compassion with accountability. What we don't have, and certainly we don't work with people like this, so I don't see them very often, but you'll see them on their teams. You see people who are uncommitted and uncaring, like they really don't want to be there. We used to call people like that dead wood. They're the ones that hopefully you're trying to find them somewhere else to shine, because I do believe that everybody has potential, but sometimes it's not in the jobs they're in. And then the other side is this demanding execution side, where you've got people that are very comfortable holding people accountable, but they're not doing it in a way that's very caring. And I think that's a bit of the challenge, I'm not going to lie, with these return to work mandates. I think that I've been watching clients who are, and I'm not against return to work, don't get me wrong. I think if that's what you need to do for your business, that's, and the only way you can make it work is that to have people in an office. Sure. But I think what I'm seeing, and I'm again curious to see what you all think about this too, and what you're observing, is that I'm seeing companies that have really gone this hardcore, get in the office 2 to 3 days. There is so much emotional energy and time and water cooler talk and internal turmoil and frustration and anger that has been going on since whenever that mandate came into play. And I look at clients that are wrestling with this 4 to 5 months, 6 months later after they put these initiatives in, compared to clients that have gone more of a moderate hybrid route, looked at things that are a little bit more, kept autonomy with their employees to have some decision around when and how they come in the office. Those people are focusing on business. Those people are just doing the work. Other clients, like the amount of energy and time, and I'm an entrepreneur, so I always think energy and time, I put a dollar value on it. And I think, God, how many dollars are being wasted on these conversations, right? So I think this is the challenge. Demanding executions can look like command and control. And we don't want that. We need to have the balance of both. So, there's a lot of people in this room that are, trying to support leaders, trying to support culture shifts, trying to do this kind of work. You're leading your own teams. You're trying to figure out, what do I do that's best for my team? Here are 3 sort of ideas to sort of help get a bit of better balance between this empathy and execution piece. I'm a big believer in team charters. Like, I think one of the big mistakes that leaders make is they try and do everything on their own and they think they have to come up with all the solutions. I think if you've got an issue where you need people to be coming in together, make that a team charter, like make that something that, we're going to talk as a team around what we're going to do. But then you got to live it. Then you've got to bring that to life. I was in a session yesterday with a team that they have a purpose statement. They have a team charter. They never talk about it. They never use it. And the problems that they keep circling back on are all the things in that charter. So we need to teach people not only how to create team charters, but actually how to implement them. I think the other thing we need to be able to do is to help leaders dial up the directness. There's great training programs out there like Fierce Conversations. There's lots of things that are fundamental around giving people feedback and giving people those tools. We're certainly seeing more of that of a need in our group coaching programs, where that's one of the topics that seems to be coming up more and more, is helping people have more direct conversations and not outsourcing it to HR, because that's what a lot of managers will do, right? They're like, oh, go and have this tough conversation with my HR business partner. No, we need to help them get more comfortable with that. And then the third thing is around transparency. I think the more we can help leaders increase transparency and candor, even when things are difficult and uncomfortable, the less you're going to run into problems down the road of unclear expectations, people feeling like, things have been thrown on them. I think, again, I'm harping on return to work just because it's like a very, and I'm not really all that passionate about it, but it's been just such a case study of seeing where it's gone wrong. And I think the problem that has really plagued a lot of organizations is that they said one thing during the pandemic, yeah, you can work remotely, no problem, this is great, da, da, da. And now it's been an perception of employees, it's an about face, and I've had people use that language, to what I thought we were all about, right? And part of it is because there's no transparency with the organization around why we're doing it. Like, hey, if it's because you've got a 10-year corporate lease and it's costing you hundreds of millions of dollars, and well, then put that out there and maybe have a conversation around, how could we make this work? Because this is the problem we all have, right? But that's often not where we feel comfortable going, right? Well, don't tell people too much because then they'll be worried. But I think the more you can encourage transparency, the better. And interestingly, the Collins dictionary word for 2024 was authenticity, most searched word. And I think partly that's because people are feeling like there's been inauthentic messaging from organizations. And they're looking to, pandemic pause also gave people a lot of reason to want to find their own purpose. And yes, team charters are totally the best. I love it. Okay, so any thoughts or questions about this sort of idea of leaders sort of swing the pendulum two-way? I think too much one way, but I'm actually seeing it now kind of going in the other way too. And this inability to balance, compassionate accountability, human-centered leadership. If you've got any kind of questions about this or your own observations, I can see Tara's been popping some things in the chat there. Would love to kind of see more or hear more, or shall we call out if there's anything that I've missed that I should know about? No? Okay, so I'll keep going. So I'm overwhelmed. I chose a picture of actually an older gentleman here because it's at the top. Like the number of C-suite leaders that we work with, the number of, very senior executive seasoned people, a lot of people opted out in the last 3 years, took early retirement or have decided to do something else. A lot of them are consulting or now leadership coaches. So I see a lot of them in that vein now. Overwhelm is real. And here's the thing though, and this is what I know to be in common with people who are, again, this top 20%, these are your achievers, these are the people with ambition, these are the people that want to go ahead. Here's the thing about those people. One thing they all have in common, they like to win. They love winning. And this is the problem. And I don't mean winning like they're necessarily competitive. They like to, it might be that they have a high excellence bar and they need things to be a certain standard, or they feel like they have to push this over the finish line. It is defeat not to finish that project, or I said I was going to do this, I'm going to commit to it, I'm going to do it. So there's a combination. Like we have an assessment tool that we use that looks at motivational energy. I can tell you from all the ones we've looked at with all the clients we've done them with, that theme and pattern, winning energy, excellence, excelling energy, enduring energy, those three energies will drive a lot of this behavior. And the other energy is really this, they call it controlling energy on the tool. It doesn't mean that you're controlling. What it means is you really take responsibility and accountability for getting stuff done, which means you take too much responsibility sometimes for getting stuff done, right? You don't know when to let go. And that's when it looks like, frankly, controlling behavior, but it comes from more of a place of wanting to, keep everything moving. And especially when you have these combos, right? So this is really tough. And then on top of that, we have this sort of mantra that's been around forever since Ben Franklin. That's like, if you want something done, ask a busy person. So what do we do with our hypos? We overload them, right? We overload them. And according to Gartner, 76% of HR managers say that their management group are overwhelmed by increased job responsibilities. And 51% are juggling more responsibilities than they can handle. The number of clients I have that get promoted and then have to backfill their old position, or have open roles on their teams and they have to be stepping in and doing that work. That is just a norm for so many of our clients. And so this is really a challenge, because when you pair that with an internal motivational drive, not to want to accept defeat and to want to keep going, this is the problem, right? I'm married to somebody who's not, he's a great performer. He's a steady Eddie, but he's very clear on his boundaries and he has no problem cutting them off. That's just the way he is. All the time he worked in organizations, that's just who he was. I wish I had that wiring. I do not have that wiring. I've burnt myself out at least 3 or 4 times over the course of my career. And so that's what we have to understand about these individuals, is that they'll keep taking on all the work you're giving to them. But what we're seeing sort of on the downside is then people questioning, maybe I'm not cut out to be a leader. I think I need to change jobs. I just heard about one of our clients that has moved on from something, and I think had a really great future with the organization she was with, but honestly was just couldn't see the forest for the trees. And so there's an expression, fatigue makes cowards of us all. And we have a lot of really top performing people that are tired and exhausted and then making career decisions from that place of exhaustion. And that's not a good place for them to make a career decision, but it's not a good place for organizations to have people making these kinds of career decisions. So here are some ways to navigate some overwhelm. And then I see a question in the chat that I'll come back to. So here's 3 ways to mitigate the overwhelm. So one I think about is you got to help people deepen their self-insight. Like the more people understand, oh, I have really high winning energy, and that's not helping me back away from this goal. And that's the little crazy voice in my head that I actually need to maybe park for a second, because what it's telling me isn't true. That's really critical. You've got to help people move beyond just surface understanding of, oh, I know I'm a red, or I'm like those sorts of intro assessments are great, and they're intro. But when we're really talking about differential investment and helping people who are going to really move the organization forward, I'd say you got to get deeper for them to really manage their own burnout triggers themselves. You can't do it as an organization. Doesn't matter how much mental health support you put in. Let's stop it before it gets to that point, right? Let's be preemptive, not reactive. Second is deepen team insight. We have to start shifting away. I talked about the little Atlas manager. We've got to start shifting towards collective. How are we all in this together? And moving away from it's me as a leader who's responsible to it's us. That requires leaders to move beyond ego. And it requires us as those of us in learning and development to start to really shift focus away from individual development to team development. And I'm not talking trust falls. I'm not talking going out and having fun. That's great. Those things are important. Team building, camaraderie, that's great. I'm talking about what do we know about how we operate as a team? How do we work? How do we leverage each other's strengths? What are the norms within this team that we know are going to help us be successful? How do we hold each other accountable to these norms? Not the manager's job, our job, right? This is how you build strong culture, right? So you're modeling that and doing that. We've got to start getting into team development in a different way. And then I think the other thing is, I have a friend that wrote a book, and it was called, one of the titles of her chapters of the book was Bring the Donuts. This idea of cultivating community, to build collaboration. How do you bring people together and create support structures to decrease? Because a lot of people, frankly, are feeling very isolated and lonely. I'm very worried about the young generation of leaders. Like friends of mine, we were talking about when we started work, our workmates were our community in our first jobs, and we'd go out for drinks after work, unencumbered with marriage and children, and you'd build this community. And now there's benefits to hybrid and virtual, but I think as team leaders in particular, and those of us that support team leaders, we have to get really intentional about how we're cultivating community to help support and balance the mental health issues that are under the covers here for a lot of people. And also just that it helps keep teams aligned, individuals clear on expectations. You can have these challenging conversations around expectations and do it together. I was sitting in a team, again, every time I sit in a team session or work with teams, the one common comment, everybody's too busy, nobody can afford 3 hours, they all complain about that. And then they get in the session, and at the end of the session, everybody always says, we need to do this more. We need connection, right? So how can you help cultivate community through learning programs that are designed to do that, through working with teams in a way that help them build out with leaders, encouraging them to do that, right? So what got put in my chat here?
Yeah, Tara had a great question about overwhelm and how it highlights age differences as well. So she's curious what you'd recommend as we try to navigate the generations in the workplace and learning and unlearning as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things, and I mentioned this earlier, it's tough right now because you've got this younger generation of leaders that are really looking for a lot of mentorship, coaching support from their managers, and then managers who are doing double duty jobs, right? And again, if the manager leans more towards results than people, they're going to prioritize doing the work over having their one-with-ones, their career conversations. I mean, I can predict it. As soon as I see somebody's motivational energy chart, I know what their 360 is going to look like, and I know what their direct reports are going to be complaining about. And so you see those patterns, and I think, so it doesn't really change that much. I think what's happening is the pressure is changing on especially younger people that aren't going to stick around if they're not getting it. So I think that's one of the things I'm seeing. And then I think from a senior leadership perspective, oh man, this is a rabbit hole I could go down in a big way. I think that a lot of senior leaders got promoted. I think the way we identify who's top leadership talent, the way we move people up through the organization is rooted in the results side of this balance sheet, if you think about results versus relationships. And that actually is a bit of a challenge, right? So you've got a culture at the top of the house that if it's very, very results focused, is not going to be providing the support or learning or prioritizing that, again, because that's generally how everybody is leaning and thinking, right? And so I think generally, I think the opportunity within HR and talent teams is to look at how do we define leadership and what is there potential in somebody who maybe isn't driving the top results, but really is able to engage teams, and what's the future of our culture going to look like if we're only continuing to, promote people up who are big results drivers. On a darker side, if you read any books like Snakes in Suits or, the psychopathy of organizations, the challenge for, a lot of leaders is that the qualities that we look for and admire in leaders that get stuff done are very close to narcissistic traits, right? So a lot of organizations are set up to promote people who have a lot of those tendencies, and that's, those are tougher people to coach, I'm not going to lie, and they're not necessarily as open. So I feel like I've gone down a very dark path there, but this is a systemic challenge. And I think you have to, if you're in an opportunity to look at learning and development, you've got to look at the whole view. How are we recruiting people? What's our measures of success? How are we bringing them through the system? Like, it's not just the development aspect. You have to look at the whole 9 yards of what you're trying to build, right, as an organization. So hopefully I haven't depressed you all, but that's Snakes and Suits is a great read. Okay, so let's keep going. Where's the love? Because this one, I think, is one that's very under the radar because we don't think about it. I worked with a executive team member who worked for a very toxic global team. And that global team's point of view was, hey, our job is to beat you up and bash you down and make sure that that's going to help you grow. Couldn't be further from the truth, right? And this is the challenge, I think, with a lot of senior folks, is that they don't get the recognition, and it's not even recognition, it's actually appreciation, right? And there was data from MIT that found that more than that, if you have a toxic culture at the top, you have a culture that is, dysfunctional, drive, results, that was more than 10 times likely to predict attrition, turnover, than employee compensation. So, you can throw money at people for a while, but most people, and especially talented people, they're not going to stay. I just actually finished reading a book, the book about Ray Dalio. I want to call it The Firm, but maybe it's called The Firm. The Fund. Great read on narcissistic leadership. Really fantastic insight into a narcissistic leader and the culture that creates. And when you look at the people that went through that organization, it's very senior, very accomplished leaders. This is something that we have to pay attention to. So that's the worst case scenario. But most organizations, hey, they're not that toxic. You've got leaders that are well-intended. But here's the thing, we think about recognition, and I can't tell you the number of companies that I see have values, celebrate success, recognize and reward. And what's always the thing that they say they don't do well? It's always those things, right? It's like me joking around about me saying, well, have fun is one of our values, and I delegated it because I'm not good at it. I think that this seems to be an epidemic across most of the companies we work with. But when I sit in and I listen to what people are looking for, they're not looking for those smile, like maybe there's some that are looking for those small things and the trophies, but I would say most are not. What I hear over and over again, and I think what our team sees and when we're talking about is, it's not about that. It's actually about gratitude and appreciation. It's actually about feeling that you are appreciated for what you're bringing into the world of work. And what there was some studies done out of Cornell and the University of Southern California, where they looked at gratitude and they found that actually gratitude decreases as power increases. So the more seasoned and senior you are, the less likely you are to thank other people. And I think this is such an overlooked, such an easy tool that's so overlooked. The same study found that 59% of employees said that they never had a boss who appreciates them. And 53% would have stayed longer if they'd had more appreciation. This is a small win area here, but it's not just, I think we put a lot of emphasis into doing it with frontline people, but not so much junior people, right? Or senior people. And so these are things that you can think about doing as you think about whether you're leading your own team or you're, trying to support a culture that if you're hearing that recognition and rewards, or your employee engagement surveys are always like, we need more recognition and rewards. I would say maybe you need more appreciation and gratitude. So what are 3 ways you can do that? Well, one, you can encourage it. And I think when you're virtual and hybrid, how do you make sure that leaders are being really intentional about it, and when they do have face-to-face opportunities, make sure they're capitalizing on those face-to-face opportunities to express gratitude for people. The other way to do it is to broaden people's perspectives. So we do group programs, and one of the things that happens in a group coaching program is people hear other people's perspectives on issues and then become grateful for that. They start to understand, oh, I didn't realize your team does that much work to support our team. Wow, really appreciate that, So helping build those sort of cross-functional understanding, that's what I hear the most. People say, oh, my team's really great at, but I wish our cross-functional partners, I wish the finance team knew how much work went into that, PowerPoint deck that they shot down, or that idea that they shot down in an instant. Right? That's where people don't feel like they're contributing and feel unappreciated. And then finally, really think about embedding it into daily workflow practices for yourself as a leader or for your leaders. How can you start to, one of the things we do with my team is at our monthly meetings, we always open with peer feedback. Who has some kudos for somebody on the team who's really been living the values? It's a very simple practice, but it makes sure that we're all focusing on and thanking each other for the contribution that we're making. It doesn't have to be complicated. And I laughed because there's actually people that are gratitude consultants out there, which to me always speaks to, okay, there's got to be a problem if you've got somebody who's actually making a living being a gratitude consultant. So think about ways to cultivate gratitude. Okay, Shelby, what have I missed in the chat? Anything that's coming in?
Yes, Amy has a great question back to the community piece. So she says, does how we define community also need to change? So often it's thought of as being together in person, and with more hybrid and remote work, that can't always be the case anymore. Yeah.
I mean, I think building community in hybrid, you can do it. And I think virtual, like when I started the roundtable, we were fully virtual, but I do think there's a place if you can be intentional, even if you can only do it once a year, where you bring everybody together. I worked for a consulting firm once that had offices across Canada. And once a year, we used to do this event called Kickoff, where everybody came into Toronto for 3 days. And I can remember we did it for years. And then one of the bigger firms said, this is a lot of money. It's expensive to fly up all our people. We don't think it's necessary. Let's make a smaller meeting. And so we shifted to that. And I will tell you, it totally changed the alignment and the connectivity within the culture of the organization. So I think, we have to be strategic and we have to be really thoughtful and purposeful about building community. And I think when you're running remote, you really have to think about all the methods that you're doing to make sure people are connected. And it's small things. It's taking a minute at the start of a meeting to ask a connection question. What's your favorite band? What's something that you're really proud of this week? What's something you're looking forward to this summer? Small questions, don't have to be long, but that builds connection and community. Work has gotten way too transactional, right? Way too transactional.
Yeah,
Yeah, and Tara, I love that. Like maybe it's useful to define community together as a team. 100%, right? Like, what do we want out of this? Like, it was so funny yesterday. I was watching another facilitator facilitate an in-house team session because we're, incorporating into our program. And they were talking about how can this team have more fun? And the team kept saying, but we're having fun. It's not fun in our team that's a problem. But the facilitator really wanted them to talk about, like, what can you guys be doing to have more fun? But their point was fun in the organization. We're not having fun in an organization. And I think this is one of the challenges that when we've got this hybrid work and we've got people in sometimes and not in other times, and I have to go in 2 days a week, but I was on Zoom calls all day, which I could have done at home, blah, blah, blah. I think generally, broadly, we have to think about how are we creating pull situations that are going to bring people together and broaden community. That's what I feel people are really lacking, but it's not what I'm not hearing it's necessarily within some teams it is, but a lot of times it's the broader camaraderie piece that people have lost. But a mandate isn't going to get you there. The saying, be a magnet, not a mandate. Right? Any other questions, Shelby?
No, we've got them all.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I think I just want to, we talked about, 3 sort of the trends that we've seen. I want to sort of say to all of you, like, I think whether you're a leader or you're in talent, the reality is that there are unknowns, there are obstacles, there are all kinds of things that leaders are going to be facing. That is never going to change. That is never going to change. And what happens is that, those things, though, become overwhelming to leaders. They start to feel like they can't do them, that they're, and this is what I see with so many of our clients who are just like, this is hopeless. I just need to check out and do something else. It must be me. I need to check out and do something else. What we need to do, those of us that are coaches, those that are in learning development, and those of us that are supporting teams, is to build some support structures to help us get there. And I just finished reading Adam Grant's new book, Hidden Potential. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. And one of the things he talks about is when we meet those moments where we're feeling stuck, we're feeling, that we're languishing, that, things aren't going to get better. We need to we can overcome it by this concept of having scaffolding. So overcoming obstacles with scaffolding. And how he defines scaffolding is this way. So I'll read it to you. So many new skills don't come with a manual, and steeper hills often require a lift. That lift comes in the form of scaffolding, a temporary support structure that enables us to scale heights we couldn't reach on our own. It helps us build the resilience to overcome obstacles that threaten to overwhelm us and limit our growth. We need to provide people with scaffolding, okay, and move away from this idea that's the lone leader who's going to be sitting over there having everything figured out while the rest, everybody else sits together, waiting for direction. We can do this by helping people cultivate their networks. I mean, that's why I'm a big fan of group coaching. Cultivate your networks. Who can you connect with? Who can you talk to? Who understands what you're going through? Having coaches and mentors. This is critical, internal, external. Have people that are sounding boards who can guide you and help you see differently outside of what, what's right in front of you. And then understand your limitations, know where you need a different perspective on who you are and what's getting in your way so that you can move forward past temporary setbacks. This is what we need to be thinking about and cultivating, I think, to help all of our leaders. And I think really we have two choices. You know, we can continue down the path of what I call heroic leadership, this idea of like it's individualistic. We have to, you know, every leader has to be everything to everybody. Or we can choose to go down the path of helping leaders cultivate support systems and community through different things like group coaching. So thank you for being with me today. It's been a pleasure having all of you on the call. Great questions that came in. And I'll just finish this up with you. We do have Michael Bungay-Stainer coming up in February. He and I were talking yesterday. It is going to be a spicy conversation. So I hope you can join me. We're going to talk about how to work with almost anyone, his book, and obviously we'll touch on the coaching habit too. And if you're interested in peer coaching, reach out to Shelby to learn more. We've got an open enrollment Roundtable for Leaders program that's filling up now for director and VP level. So you can get a sense of how that works. So thank you, everyone. It's great to have you here, and we'll send out a summary next week. And
Thanks,
the recording.
everyone.
Right, Shelby?
Yes.
Amazing.